So Uyghurs rather, who are they? Well, they're not Chinese. Ethnically, they're very much like Turkish people. Um, in Central Asia, there's this whole bunch of countries. It's a large area. I refer to as the stands. There's Turkestan, there's Afghanistan, there's all kinds of stands around there. And what the people are is, they're the original inhabitants of Central Asia, and culturally, they're very close to the people that are in Turkey. And what do I have next? So staying on that first slide for a second, the slide on the left is a slide that shows the location of about 460 camps. And the story is that there are these concentration camps in Xinjiang. I can't say it right now for some reason. This area, this East Turkmenistan area,
Xinjiang province.
What's that?
Xinjiang province.
Yeah, thank you. Every time you're going to have to say it. Okay, so one thing about what's been happening to the American news is we hear reports and they're never followed up, and they're vague, and so we get this impression that it maybe is going on, maybe it isn't going on. Well, I've spent enough time on this to know that it is going on, and the world needs to pay more attention to it. It does actually have implications for us, and we'll be getting into that. So what's happened is because the Chinese people are mostly Han Chinese, which is a very specific ethnic group of Chinese, and they're 90%. And there were ethnic issues through the years with the people in Xinjiang, and they're looked down upon by the rest of the Chinese people. They're given poor jobs, and so there's kind of there's an ethnic tension. And about 2010, there was a serious riot in one of the cities because frankly, the dominant Chinese have been oppressing these people for quite a few times. They don't get the right jobs. They're considered to be inferior. And so there was a riot, and that led to the government deciding that they would take care of the problem by eliminating the Uyghurs. And so we'll be discussing genocide and what it is, and why it does apply to this case. And I know it does. I've gotten into it, and I'll explain myself. And so it's quite an eye-opening report, and let's get into it. So what do we have next? Next, we have a slide that Amos, you put this one in. So this one's new to me. Let's just play it and see what's there.
Yep. All right, here we go.
In a far corner of northwestern China, a car drives along a wall lined with barbed wire, heading towards what looks like a standard apartment complex. Access here is restricted, and the camera person is filming secretly. Because this is no ordinary residence. It's part of a contentious labor resettlement program run by the Chinese government to extend state control over Muslim minorities, mostly Uyghurs, by moving them from one part of China to work in another. This covert, low-quality footage that we've adjusted to reveal some details and obscure others gives us some rare insights into how people in this program live and are indoctrinated. Over the last few years, the mass incarceration of more than 1 million Uyghurs and Kazakhs by the Chinese government has led to international outrage. These labor programs are part of that larger story. Let's take a closer look at the compound we showed you at the beginning. It's in Xinjiang, in the northern city of Koitun, where the population is mostly China's Han ethnic majority. But the workers in the compound are Uighurs and other minorities, transferred there from their homes in Hotan and Kashgar, hundreds of miles away. At the Kwaitun complex, there are multiple dormitories. We see that right around the time the transfer started in 2017, a security checkpoint and another building, a cafeteria, were built at the site. The camera person is now shooting inside of the cafeteria. We can see the compound's residents. They all work as street cleaners. A sign describing the program calls them Kashgar and Hotan surplus labor. It also lists instructions for how they should conduct themselves, and another poster offers guidelines on how to interact with the local population. This program, and others like it, have led to the relocation of hundreds of thousands of Uighurs away from their homes and families. But government propaganda openly promotes these as poverty alleviation initiatives.
促进喀什和田地区城乡富余劳动力转移就业，增加城乡富余劳动力收入，体现了党中央、习近平总书记和自治区党委政府对喀什和田地区各族群众的关心关怀。
What's at stake here is about more than just putting people into labor programs. The bigger goal is to turn Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities away from their own heritage to be more in line with the rest of communist China. Back at the compound, the rules strictly limit when and where the workers can go. We hear about this as a camera person meets residents in the sleeping quarters.
那你像你们这个晚上，比如说你不在食堂吃饭，你可以出去吃饭吗？
中午，中午吃可以。
不是，我说你来了1年了，你回去过没有？看过孩子没有？
孩子没有。
This man was pressured to come here a year earlier, leaving his family, a wife and young child, behind. His life here includes mandatory Mandarin classes in the evenings. And despite the government's claim that they are lifting these workers out of poverty, he says he's only making a third of what he did back home.
你这个每个月发多少钱呢
2000。
像你没来之前，你在家里面收入多少钱啊？
去年的200一天。
Yarkand County is the home he left behind. For Uyghurs in towns like these, the future is becoming increasingly uncertain. Because the decision whether to stay or go is often no longer in their hands.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah,
I won't say that's a bad report. I won't say it's a good one, Amos. You know, I've watched a lot of reports on this stuff, and a lot of them spend a lot of time, too much time, trying to make everybody happy. That report gave the impression that things were somewhat voluntary, like this man chose to go to this camp. No, these people are being arrested. Families are being broken up. A organized plan to eliminate the Uyghurs as a national identity is well underway. And let's go on to the next slide, because I will say that clip does dovetail nicely with everything else we're going to do here. Okay, now this one I put together, it's got 3 still pictures, and these pictures, you know, I think each one's worth about 1,000 words, and so you have 3,000 words saying that the camps actually exist. And then up in the right is a very short clip that just is off the front of a report that Anderson Cooper made. And I did some things to this clip, and I'm not pleased with what Anderson Cooper did. It looks like a really good report. When I first saw it, you know, I thought, oh, interesting, very good. And then I realized it was actually pretty insidious. So let's play it, and then I'll explain myself why I think so.
Before we continue, I just want to...
What's that?
Keith, before we continue, I just wanted to check. Joyce, welcome, but is our volume any better? You guys hear us? Please indicate in the chat so we know that the volume level is okay. Regarding that video, oddly enough, since you've put together the presentation, the videos that you've included have been removed which I found very strange. But
well, try it again, because last time I tried to play it, it worked.
Milquetoast.
Toward ethnic Uyghur Muslims
Right.
has split up thousands of families. The U.S. and other countries have labeled China's treatment of Uyghurs as genocide.
Milquetoast.
China denies the human rights abuse allegations, claiming their actions are justified to combat religious extremism and prevent terrorism.
Okay, they're justified? No.
right.
Yeah, it's not justified at all. And what Anderson did there, it's for what it is, it's a good report. They identified two families and they showed that they were being broken up. But they did pick two families that you would have a little bit of issue on, not with the people in the families, but one family was a couple that had two children. They were being PhD students and they were studying abroad in Turkey. And so, then they're harassed by the government. And then a report can be made about, oh, this is just some kind of bureaucratic malfeasance and so on, because, obviously, we may not agree with what the Chinese are doing, but they're just being concerned about the security and, these people are out of the country and so on. And the other family they reported, they picked a family with 6 children. Now, 6 children in China, I don't care how you cut that cheese, we all know that something weird's going on. And so it turned out, and then during the report, it turns out that this family escapes because a woman's going to be given an abortion, and they leave 4 children in China with relatives. And so you find in the report, they're really not bad people because some circumstances made this happen maybe, but it gives you a bad taste. And so you're left with a confusion of, well, is China doing this in some justified way or not? And no, they're not. Well, what they're doing is they're displacing this people by, the Han Chinese totally outnumber all their minorities. So what they've been doing is they've been moving, basically doing what the Israelis do in their settlements. They move in and they make the area into their own ethnic universe, and then the people that are displaced can figure out, maybe do they have fast food in China? I don't know what they do for after they're displaced, but it's not right. So now this next one, well, let's play this and see what I've got in this one. Oh yeah, this first part is off a website. It's quiet and the sound won't start for a moment.
Xinjiang makes mountains of cotton, 1/5 of the world's total.
And they're waiting for us.
We're turned back at checkpoints, stopped from filming, questioned and followed.
Further behind is also following us.
This is one site we're trying to get to, a giant re-education camp. But more recently, something else has been built next door, a textile factory. Days after its completion, a large group of people can be seen being moved between the camp and the factory.
Wow, and this is the factory here. It's extraordinary.
From the ground, it's clear the factory and accommodation blocks are all now one single site, plastered with Communist Party slogans. But when we get out to film,
We are entitled to film in public anywhere in China.
China says these places are simply about creating jobs. But everywhere we go,
There's this extraordinary effort to stop us documenting any of it.
in Xinjiang, a whole culture is under suspicion. More than 1 million Uyghurs and other traditionally Muslim minorities are thought to have been swept into the camps, viewed by China as potential Islamist separatists. But each year, more than 2 million others are being gathered for something else. Giant new factories and textile mills, hundreds of them, where they face strict controls and political indoctrination. The first thing our workers have to learn is to love the Communist Party, this factory boss says. But now the BBC has seen evidence that shows Uyghurs are also being sent en masse into the cotton fields.
One day my family will disappear from this world.
Mahmoud, not his real name, left Xinjiang 3 years ago, but his family still lives there.
And my mom told me she's picking the cotton for the government officers. It's like our duty to do that work. They will just go because they are so afraid of being taken to jail or somewhere else.
Newly uncovered documents show the scale. 150,000 pickers sent to one area, almost as many again organised for another. They're given ideological education, and the lazy, the authorities say, are being taught the glories of work. The evidence suggests that the real intention here in Xinjiang is the dismantling of an entire culture and its rebuilding through the total control of people's families, their faith, their thoughts, and on a massive scale across the fields and factories of this region in the work that they do. In a written statement, the Chinese government said workers from all ethnic groups in Xinjiang choose their jobs according to free will and sign contracts in accordance with the law. It said accusations of forced labour were completely fabricated. As we leave Xinjiang, we pass this prison camp complex, thought to contain multiple factory buildings. It's the first independent footage of this truly colossal site, a final chilling reminder that here, mass incarceration and mass labour are closely connected. John Sudworth, BBC News, Xinjiang.
Yes.
But why is China doing this? After all, Xinjiang is China's territory, isn't it? It's because the Chinese government, or the CCP, the Communist Party of China, is a Han-majority ethno-state that suppresses minorities. Don't get confused with American identity politics. We're talking about a country that is over 90% of one ethnic group, and what they say goes. They can try to pretend like there's 56 dancing, happy ethnic minorities, but in fact they're nothing more than a novelty for Han Chinese entertainment. China likes to keep up a facade of naming certain provinces autonomous regions, but what that actually means is that those regions are in fact so not autonomous that they're under twice as much, if not more, surveillance than a normal Han population province. You see, the Chinese government doesn't like when cultures are different to the majority Han culture, so they oppress different people groups with the utmost brutality. It truly baffles me that people that adhere to principles of socialism or look at China as a shining example of a beacon of socialism would actually celebrate China's treatment of minorities. If you're the kind of person who believes in equality for everyone, you shouldn't look at China as the example of a successful country. It's a racist, brutal ethno-state. The Uyghur people in Western China happen to be the most different from what you'd consider a normal Chinese person. What with their own culture, language, and religion. So China feels the need to restrain them in every way possible. It's a modern-day genocide in 2021, and China's getting away with it. China has the tightest control over this area of the country than any place in the entire world. It's very similar to North Korean surveillance, but with much more money and much more technology. We don't have the thousands of refugees that we see from other countries because China is not Syria. It can keep people's mouths shut, monitor them, and keep them inside of the borders of China, and then corrals them into concentration camps if there's any suspicion of them breaking the rules. And what are the rules? Pretty much just existing. Yes, there's tribunals. Yes, it's in the media. But what can we actually do to stop China? It seems like most people actually want to just keep buying cheap crap on Amazon. Some people read a sad headline and then they move on and go about their day. And that's the way the world works. But you have to understand that these people in Xinjiang, they have no options left. There's no platform for their voices. China censors everything. It's already bad enough to be a Chinese citizen behind the Great Firewall of China and to be blocked from the rest of the internet, but especially if you're a Uyghur person in Xinjiang. You see, it's a crime of second-degree terrorism simply for a Uyghur to use a VPN to post something on the internet.
Yeah, it's something to mention about this whole thing is first that they're the first country that have used state-of-the-art data technology and digital technology to surveil, to spy on such a population. You drive in a car, there's a mandatory placement of a dashboard cam, but the dashboard cam is not pointed outwards, it's pointed towards the passengers, and everything is recorded and everything can be inspected or looked at any particular time. You don't know when they're watching you or not. There's cameras on the street that are like every 50 meters in some cases. They really have a strong big data operation that surveils huge amounts of data every second to sift through and find anybody who's even used a Muslim greeting or anything like that. As to what you said about that article, whether that made it look like it's voluntary. Well, in some cases, and I don't know if that's something that also changed with time or changes in time, but in some cases people were given an offer that they couldn't refuse. So they're voluntarily picking between going to a re-education camp so that their families don't suffer more, or that they don't lose all their income ability and starve to death. So it's not really much of an option. It's just kind of horrifying, and yeah, it just really is upsetting, and the fact that the world is not at the point where we can even fully have this addressed. There's no strong political will to tackle China because of their increasing amount of influence in the world, their economic power, in their political influence in various parts of the world. So it's just very sad for this population to be under such siege and not be able to have any voice or anything in their for their protection.
Yes. You know, in this last video, actually, what I did was I edited a BBC report, condensed it, put it in there, and then I put another one, and on that slide I listed the sources. One of them is a former English teacher, Lohai, and that was the second report. And I basically agreed with everything he said, so I put that one in there. And I started out that video with, it looked like a boring slideshow, and it's quiet. And what that is, that's a website, was listed on the top of that slide, that, you go there and it's a website dedicated to the Uyghur issues. And on that website was a short video that's well worth watching, and it is on a separate slide all by itself. I think this one may be it. Oh yes, I think you got it up there, Amos. So let's play that one next, and then we'll want to probably go back to the divided families ones and do that one. So start that one up.
мұсылман ұлтын жою керек, мұсылманның жазуын, мұсылман киімін бәрін жоғалту керек. Бірыңғай Қытай болу керек деген жоспарлаған.
The Chinese government has long treated the Turkic Muslim population of Xinjiang with disdain and hostility. It considers their distinct identity, their religion, their culture, their language, as evidence of political disloyalty, of separatism. And since the new party secretary, Chen Chuanguo, came to power in the region 2 years ago, the authorities have stepped up their Strike Hard campaign, which is designed on paper to eradicate terrorist threats, but in reality is being used to justify massive abuses across the region, including the establishment of political education camps in which people are forced to swear their loyalty to the party and the government.
Сосын мемлекеттің маузудың жырларын, сосын Шинжипиннің мың жасауын, жалпы Қытай халқының өмір тарихын жырлауды ғой сол.
There may be up to 1 million people being held in these camps, and it doesn't seem to matter that there's no legal basis for arbitrarily detaining people and forcing them to go through this kind of re-education.
Барлық үйден бәріне түрмеге кіргізіп ешқандай себепсіз алып кеткен.
Ешқандай көрмедім де, не бір дауысын естімедім. Сонымен ол аз деп өнің қойын, мына 13 жастағы қызымды да саяси үйренуге кіргізіп кетіпті.
Our recent research shows that life inside the political education camps and life in Xinjiang in general are actually not so very different.
Бірақ бізде дінді қыса бастады. Хижаб таққандарды, мындай оранғандарды шетінен ұстай бастады.
Қазақ тілін өтпейтіндіктен ұрпағым Қытай тілінде жаңағыдай өтетіндіктен кейін келешегі ұрпақтарымыз Қытай болып кетпеу үшін келді.
A number of scholars and journalists have described Xinjiang today as being the contemporary police state. The region is awash in security forces, in checkpoints, metal detectors. It's almost impossible to do anything outside the line of the authorities' sight.
Камера деген жетеді. Мысалы, бір сағатта жететін жеріңе, азыр деген жарым күндәрін жетесің. Ана жерге барып бір түсіп удостоверениең көзіңді, денеңді тексерте берсең,
10 метр жерге жүрсең, бір сақшы қана одан бітті-ау десең, тағы 10 метр жерде сен сол қолың ұстап жүресің ғой, жан қалтаңа, самайсың қалтаңа. Кешке шейін тексереді бізді. Қандай өмір сүреміз?
Yes, that's a good video. That website is kind of heavy on the oppression from a religious point of view, and which is true. That's what's going on. But really, the bigger picture is to try to actually eliminate the people, and that the definition of that is genocide. But before we get much further into those questions, let's go to slide 27. We'll watch that one because this one's going to get more into the personal aspect of the breaking up of families and what's going on. And we've mentioned the security state there, and I'll jump ahead a little bit and just mention my impression is that it's not very professional. They're using all the tools of surveillance, all the tools of technology. They're using algorithms, which are not good algorithms. It's a bunch of amateurs playing with very powerful toys, and it's bureaucratized. So horrible things have to be happening. You've got 1 to 3 million people. Nobody's really clear about how many people, but the number is massive. And so let's watch this. The particular, you see this woman up. You'll see her in the video. Very good. She's not acting, but she's. If she was an actress, she would be doing a very good job. So let's watch this one.
It's very sad. Oops.
Although they've cracked down and censored these emoji videos because the Chinese government doesn't want these to get out to the general public. The Chinese government doesn't want people to know what is happening in this very last-ditch attempt effort to try to get some information out there, to try to get the world to pay attention. These women put it all on the line. And despite them being censored for doing so, that hasn't stopped new trends from happening, which is now where women are just crying in front of photos of men in their lives that have been taken away, whether it be their fathers or uncles, brothers, relatives. People that they love have been removed and put into camps. This is desperation. These Uyghur women have no platform, no voice, no opportunity to share actually what happened because of China's brutal authoritarian regime and the surveillance state it's created. So all they can do is show you their tears in front of their lost loved ones. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see these kind of messages in a bottle, so to speak, going out there only to fall mostly on deaf ears. It's the least we can do to try to spread their message and give them a little bit of hope that maybe at some point things will get better and the Chinese government will be brought to justice.
Yeah, disguising their resentment as something else so that they can get it out there. It's
right.
profoundly
There's
sad.
two methods that were on that video. One was the women, get in front of a picture and do a green screen thing like we're doing right now to show that their husband is not with them. And the other thing, which was too small for people to see, but it's in, this is a clip from a much larger video. And what they do is they send out emojis and they tell their life stories with these emojis. Like they'll show, the heart and a couple. So they fall in love, they get married, then they show a child, then they show the child taken away. And so they're able to show the heartbreak of their life story through these emojis. And one emoji I found particularly disturbing was a woman at the end shows it's the smiling face with sunglasses that we all know. And what that means is, well, I'll kind of make a little story myself, just so you get clear what this means. A Han Chinese official sees a young Uyghur company. He finds the wife very attractive. So he sends the husband off to a work camp. And then he moves himself into the wife's house. And that's what that emoji means. That a government official has taken the place of the husband in the family. One thing about, not covered in any of this, but there were other, in other videos I watched and so on, there is a sexual exploitation in all this. So, the Uyghur women are being used, and the power that the dominant Chinese have over them allows, rampant abuse. You don't get, how many hundreds of thousands of people are involved in this? They're not all angels. So you just imagine, you've got the entire spectrum from just violation of civil rights and being forced to be slave labor to, horrible things that probably make you wish you weren't alive. So that's what's going on there. And so we'll go on to 29 now. And 29 is, this book has not yet been released. And over on the right, we'll play a short segment of it when I'm finished talking about what it is. And it's a very long, and the clip we're going to watch isn't very long, but I watched the whole thing. There is a bookstore in Washington, D.C. called Poetry and Prose, and they do a lot of really good author interviews where people go in and they sit down in chairs and they listen to an author talk about his book, and then the whole thing's videoed, and I watch them here and there. And I'm going to read this to you right now. This is what I'm going to read. You can see it on your screen. And this promotes his book. I thought it did a very good job though, so I'll read it. Blocked from facts and truth, under constant surveillance, Surrounded by a hostile alien police force, Xinjiang's Uyghur population has become cursed, oppressed, outcast. Most citizens cannot discern between enemy and friend. Social trust has been destroyed systematically. Friends betray each other, bosses snitch on employees, teachers expose their students, and children turn on their parents. Everyone is dependent on a government that nonetheless treats them with suspicion and contempt. Welcome to the perfect police state. And the author makes a point in this that it's really perfect not because the technology is perfect and doesn't make mistakes. It's perfect because the people have no power and don't know what's going on. And that it's perfect from the sense of being 100% effective. So yeah, so the technology that's going on over there and the way the people are being watched, it's something like right out of Minority Report. Some of these algorithms that are being used, well, I don't know if we'll see. I know it was in one video I watched, and it's Minority Report. They're like, oh, somehow a algorithm figured out, like, if you're taking out your garbage at 2 a.m, that you might be a terrorist, and then the algorithm triggers you for arrest, and then people actually come and arrest you. It's crazy, but this is what happens when you marry technology with inappropriately with this kind of stuff.
And another movie that comes to mind in that context is Brazil, where a fly falls onto the printout and they come and arrest the rogue person.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So what do we have next here?
So about the 21st century nature of this perfect police state, as you call it in the title. Talk us through some of the technologies that we're seeing, some of the methods that are being pioneered by the Chinese, and your sense of how this can be replicated or transplanted in other contexts elsewhere.
So one of the, I guess, oddly terrifying things about the Chinese tactics in Xinjiang and nationwide, actually, is that in 2005 China started its surveillance. So it started its surveillance. I'm having trouble kind of defining this, because it's not a single surveillance system, but this is like a collection of systems that have been pieced together over the years. And so this collection of systems was called Skynet, which is, for those of you who have seen Terminator, when you go to China, you're essentially being surveilled by the Skynet system. Obviously, I don't think there was a Chinese bureaucrat somewhere who was a Terminator fan and thought, hey, this is a great idea. Let's name our surveillance system Skynet and, repress the Uighurs with that. There's a Chinese context to that name that goes kind of deep, and I don't need to get into it here. But the irony of that name is just that it just defines just this foreboding, this like menacing foreboding sense of how the surveillance system works. One of the Uighurs who was very well informed, someone who I actually interviewed, one of the only people who I actually could talk to in Xinjiang in 2017 as these crackdowns were happening. I had a very, very worldly, well-informed assistant who told me about how what's happening in Xinjiang is it's a panopticon. And a panopticon, this is an idea that was created by the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham, and it also has many echoes in George Orwell and a lot of these sci-fi dystopian novels from the past 50 years. And so the panopticon is this prison system in which it's a circular prison, and in the outer circle there are all the cells, and all the people in the prison are in their cells that go in the circle, and in the center of the circle, looking outwards at all the cells, is a guard post, a sentry post, but it's constructed in a way so that like nobody can actually see the guard. And what it does psychologically to people is that it makes them fear that they are constantly being watched, but they don't know when or where or how. I mean, you just don't know, like, is the guard standing at your side of this circle and looking at you directly? Does he have a, does he have a telescope? Does he, is he like holding up, some kind of audio device to listen in on your conversations with your fellow cellmates? Like, you just have no idea what is happening behind the veil. And it could even be no one's there. I mean, it could just be it could be a Wizard of Oz scenario where there's just this, there's some pretender just, dozing off who's not the real deal, who doesn't really care about surveillance. But that still terrifies people because they're so uncertain about whether or not they're being watched at any given moment. So this is the essence and nature of the Skynet system of China. I did find a lot of evidence in my reporting in both written documentation that I found. I did get a number of leaks in the process of this, and also my interviews with some technology workers who had worked on this, this surveillance system in Xinjiang. They told me that actually behind the veil, the system was not all that sophisticated, that actually they didn't totally understand how it worked. They were using crude algorithms. They just had bad data at times. I mean, it's like they would gather so much data that nobody could figure out what data was worthwhile and what was garbage. And nobody could really figure out, like, how does the AI system find a correlation, between someone who, like walks in the back door of their house and, that means that they are going to commit a terrorist crime in a week. Like, these are the kinds of correlations that the AI would make for them. And so, so like, yeah, I mean, like that's, it's kind of like goofy that, that the AI would think that, but, that's the irony of this perfect police state. I find it just so ironic that the perfect police state is perfect because of its imperfections, because it's not perfect. Like, I just think that if this system were actually perfect, then people would be able to figure out how it works, and they would, find ways to, not go to a concentration camp. But the nature of the Chinese system is that it's like this Kafka, bureaucracy overload, where it's just, everyone is a potential terrorist, just arrest arbitrarily, send people to camps arbitrarily. And it terrifies people, and it terrifies them into snitching on other people, making up stories, get your neighbor sent to the camp so you're not sent. You'll be more trustworthy that way. So it's like, it's a system that consumes itself, and, it's consumed a lot of Uyghur society in the process. So that's really, that's how I would define the core of the Chinese strategy in this region.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the aspect to it that really matters to us is what's happening in China right now with the Uyghurs could happen, is probably going to happen in a lot of different ways all over the world, because the technology is seductive and people in power are going to use it. Anyway, and one other thing before we go on is we saw the video about the cotton being picked and the textile being made, and one issue is this cotton shirt. It may have been made by slave labor. I don't know, and that's something else that's affecting us directly, because these people are being used. This is slavery. There's no other way to put it. Now, okay, moving on. The word genocide has come up. Now, Anderson Cooper, in his Milquetoast report, he said some governments have described this as genocide, and a lot of other weak reports question whether or not it's a genocide or not. And so I looked up the definition, and more importantly, I thought about it too. And I realized that, okay, what do I have here? Let's see. Let me see what slide I'm on. Okay. Yeah, this slide, we pretty much know where this slide was taken. That's obviously black and white. That's obviously from a Nazi camp. And this matches pretty much what we think of genocide is. And, there are others. Let's go to the next slide. And there are other reports, similar situations where, there's lots of mass death and a lot of killing. And so we think that's what genocide is. But that's not what genocide is. These things are a genocide, yes, but genocide is the deliberate, you're deliberately erasing people. And if you're going to do that, you're going to kill somebody. You're not going to eliminate the national identity and change the way people live, change their language, change their system of writing, change where they work, break up their families. I don't have to go on. You're not going to do that without killing somebody. So whether or not the definition of killing belongs in the definition of genocide is really kind of a moot point. You can't have one without the other. So the question is how much, and in determining how much, if it's there, it's genocide. So that kind
Keith,
of answers the question. Yeah.
So Keith, basically the destruction of the Native American or Aborigines basically was a genocide, not because people were killed. Of course they were killed, but because they eliminated this ethnicity in terms of existence, national existence.
You know, Amos, it's funny you should say that, because halfway into this report, a bell went off in my head, and I realized that part of the reasons Americans may have a lot of trouble understanding what's going on in Wuhan is because of what we'll see on the next slide. And this just came to me. You know, you've got a native population, and you've got a civilization meeting it, and that winds up in displacing the people. So we have our Native Americans. They met civilization, you know, go west, young man, on the old west trains, and that led to you know, the cities. But one thing that is really important that this slide brings out is the displacement, because by settling, China is very deliberately settling enough Han Chinese in the area so that the Uighurs will become a minority in their own land, where they're not a minority, you know, or they weren't a few years ago. I think they are now. So, you know, there's very definite parallels to, I think, the American story between the Chinese story, you know. So let's move on to the next one.
But before we do, I just wanted to note that while watching and reading about it, it struck me how much it reminded me of things that were going on with the Holocaust, and I'm not comparing like the scale of the murder or anything like that. What I'm alluding to is things like the sights of these people being like ushered with their packages on their backs to the camp, like them having this thing on their chest, a big ribbon thing, like kind of like identifying them as ethnic Uyghurs, which reminds me of the yellow star, and stuff like that. It basically there's so much parallel. The fact that they often staged, the Chinese media often stages these shows of how the local population is happy, and they're like, all they're doing in these re-education camps are learning how to dance and stuff like that, and they're staging these shows for the media to show that everything's okay. Just as Theresienstadt was, as a concentration camp, was assembled purely for propaganda purposes, and then disassembled and all its people sent to death camps. So it's so reminiscent. There's so much similar tactics that it's eerie and really frightening.
Yeah, you know, comparing it to the Nazi situation, I think that the strong parallel there is the slave labor, where you've got factories, dormitories, and ikma free, work will set you free, and that's very much what's going on in China, is the slave labor. And again, we don't know if our clothes were made by slave labor or not. Yeah, so bringing up the history again, is there was a riot in about 2009, and it was a very violent riot. About 100 people were killed. It was, the Uighurs that just had enough, and they erupted. And so that led to a huge crackdown and executions. And again, there's a parallel to American history. And this one actually has a personal kind of story here. I have to get my notes up so I can read it. Okay. Yeah, the execution of, okay, you have an unrest and then you put it down violently and you execute the people to make sure they don't do this again. And this has happened in American history. And okay, I'll just get into it. I don't know how to start, so I'll just start talking. Originally, I'm from Minnesota. So my mother's family, actually, they were pioneers. And like one ancestor was like the first woman born in this particular county. So go way back in the city. And a grandfather of my grandfather on my mother's side had come out somewhere from the East Coast with 4 other people to pick out a place to build a lumber mill. And so he did that. Then he came out and he is doing his farming thing, is connected somehow with this family business that's going on. There were brothers involved and so on. There, my mother's maiden name was the same as the town where this mill was. Anyway, so I have this grandfather of a grandfather, and he used to, when he first went out to Minnesota, he was trapping along the river. And what he would do is he would always leave some game for the Indians because he knew they were being starved to death. He did not approve of this. This story came through my grandmother and my mother to me, and he got along with the Indians, and he let them hunt on his land, which a lot of the other settlers wouldn't do at all. And so he had a good relations with the locals. And this Indian war, the Dakota Indian War, broke out, and the story goes, some of his friends from town had to actually go and physically remove him from his settlement, his homestead, because he figured he got along with the Indians well enough that he'd be safe. And it's a good thing that they took him to town, because nobody was safe. It was massive violence everywhere, and the only way to survive it was to be in the town. So that's kind of a personal history of an American story. And it's kind of off topic, but we could play the video. I really put it up because I wanted to get a picture of the execution of the 38 Dakota Indians that were executed. It was just before an actual picture probably could have been taken. Maybe there's one that is in existence. I don't know. But it just shows, it just documents the execution. It's pretty short. We can watch it and return to our topic.
Yep.
Oh, we have to watch that one on YouTube because it's age restricted.
That fateful day, they were led out of the prison compound. They were shackled and chained together. They had hoods on them. The women began wailing and weeping. One of the prisoners, in a loud voice, said, "Namach umpo metakwepi, hear me, my people. Today is not a day of defeat. It is a day of victory. For we have made our peace with our Creator. We now go to be with Him forever. Remember this day to tell our children so they can tell their children that we are people who died a noble death. Do not mourn for us. Rejoice with us. It's a good day to God." And then he lifted up his voice and began singing.
Yeah. So, that's the American history. And one thing about the Uyghurs is they are good horsemen. So one can wonder if 100 years from now, if there won't be a band of Uyghurs riding into one of their cities saying, "Oh, this is where they executed so many of our people," because the parallel is pretty clear. So I hope the world wakes up to this. I hope more people pay attention, but I doubt that it will happen. We're involved economically with China. It was pretty clear from the Anderson Cooper report, which was doing this report just really fascinating, because I watched that report. I liked the Anderson Cooper report, didn't see a thing wrong with it. Then the more and more I get into this, I began to hate that report and realize that this was something that was trying to incite some kind of humanitarian sympathy without telling you what the problem really is, or what's going on, or how much we're involved with it, or any of that. So that's where we are with the Uyghurs.
Yeah, and with current political situation, I don't see any end to it. I don't know. China is expected to be the biggest global economy in a few years, and it's very I'm very pessimistic that they can survive as a culture, as an ethnicity. I think the fact that they've taken in that project of diluting this ethnicity to a point of disappearance may be successful, unfortunately, and that's very disheartening.
I hate to agree with you, but I do. It's horrible.